Let's talk about the Old West. When you hear the term bounty hunter, you probably think of a specific image, one crafted by a century of Hollywood films. But the truth is, the man you're picturing never really existed. In fact, the very term bounty hunter is a 20th century invention, a label applied long after the fact to a much different and more complicated group of men. The real story isn't about lone heroes, it's about a messy ecosystem of part-time lawmen, private detectives, opportunists, and even outright criminals, all motivated by the promise of a cash reward. Today, we're digging into the historical record to uncover how this system of manhunting actually worked. The reality is far more interesting than the myth. If you enjoy uncovering the true history behind the legends, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and give this video a thumbs up. It helps us bring more stories like this directly to you. Before we get into today's video, I have something special for you. Do you ever watch an old Western and wonder, did that really happen? Well, we've put together a free guide called the Ultimate Wild West Fact Checker's Guide, and it debunks 25 of the biggest myths lying Hollywood shows in their movies. You get it emailed to you instantly when you sign up for our free weekly newsletter. Just head on over to nativejournals.com/subscribe to grab yours and find out the truth about everything from high noon duels to what cowboys really wore. Link is in the description. Part 1. The Law of a Lawless Land. To understand the manhunter, you first have to understand his world. The Old West, in the decades after the Civil War, was a place where official authority was often a distant rumor. As boomtowns sprang up overnight, population swelled far faster than any government could keep up. In many of these raw communities, law was either non-existent or a joke. This forced settlers to take justice into their own hands, leading to the rise of vigilante committees who delivered swift and brutal punishments. Even where formal courts existed, they were often a phantom presence. A handful of judges rode enormous circuits, and a defendant might wait in a leaky local jail for months if he didn't escape first. This unreliable system created a power vacuum and a clear need for a different kind of law enforcement. The legal key that unlocked it was a landmark Supreme Court decision in 1872 called Taylor versus Taintor. This ruling gave a powerful legal blessing to the practice of hunting fugitives for money. The court's language was shockingly clear, stating that a bail bondsman or his agent could pursue a fugitive into another state, arrest him on a Sunday, and even break into his house to do it. And most importantly, the seizure is not made by virtue of due process. None is needed. This decision effectively privatized law enforcement, giving the bounty hunter powers that often surpassed those of a sworn sheriff who was constrained by warrants and jurisdictional lines. Part 2. The Three Faces of Frontier Justice. The bounty hunter was part of a complex system of justice that included two other figures, the lawman and the vigilante. The lines separating them were incredibly blurry. First you had the lawman, your town marshal or county sheriff, but their job wasn't constant shootouts. They were often underpaid, and their day-to-day duties were mundane, like collecting taxes or dealing with drunks. Then you had the vigilante. These were citizens who formed committees when they felt the law had failed. They were driven by a desire for security or revenge, not by financial gain. And finally, the bounty hunter. What set him apart was the profit motive. He pursued a fugitive not for civic duty, but for a posted reward. And thanks to that Supreme Court ruling, he operated with a veneer of legal authority. But the most important thing to understand is that these roles were fluid. A man could be all three. Sheriff Pat Garrett acted as a bounty hunter to collect the reward on Billy the Kid. Notorious outlaws like Curly Bill Brocious were sometimes hired as deputy sheriffs. The Dunn brothers of Oklahoma were wanted criminals who also collected bounties on other outlaws. The line between lawman and outlaw was often invisible. Part 3. The Business of Manhunting. At its core, bounty hunting was a business, and the people posting the biggest bounties usually weren't the government. While states offered rewards, they were often dwarfed by those from private corporations. The real money came from companies whose profits were threatened by outlaws. Railroads, stagecoach lines like Wells Fargo, and huge mining operations were the true financiers of frontier justice. They saw bounties as a form of risk management to protect their assets. The famous $10,000 bounty on Jesse James, for instance, was largely funded by railroad and express companies. In this light, the bounty hunter looks less like a hero and more like a private security contractor. And the idea that every outlaw had a fortune on his head is another myth. For the average fugitive, a bounty was modest, often around $100. Rewards were tiered. A horse thief might only get you $5 or $50, while more serious offenders could command $100 to $200. Only the most infamous outlaws fetched legendary sums. The $4,000 for John Wesley Hardin was a fortune. The $10,000 for Jesse James was the pinnacle. By contrast, Billy the Kid, despite his legend, never had a bounty greater than $500 placed on his head by authorities. Part 4. The real meaning of dead or alive. That phrase, dead or alive, is perhaps the most misunderstood part of the entire bounty system. Here's the truth. Historical records show that no known government-issued wanted poster ever used this language. It was a clause used almost exclusively by private organizations like the Pinkerton Agency and Wells Fargo. And it was not a license to kill. A bounty hunter who killed a man without clear proof of self-defense could be, and sometimes was, charged with murder. When Robert Ford shot Jesse James, he was promptly arrested and convicted of murder before receiving a pardon. The phrase had a purely practical financial meaning. It was an assurance from the issuer that the reward would be paid even if the fugitive was killed while resisting arrest. It protected the hunter's investment of time and money. In some places, the rules were even stricter, requiring criminals to be brought in alive or cutting the bounty in half if the prisoner died. Part 5. The Hunter's Craft. Perhaps the biggest myth is the lone wolf bounty hunter, a full-time professional hunting men for a living. This is almost entirely fiction. In reality, bounty hunting was extremely rare as a sole occupation. The danger and time required just wasn't worth the typical $100 reward. Most bounties were collected as a side hustle by men who already had a day job. The most common collectors were local lawmen supplementing their meager incomes. The other main group was private detectives from firms like the Pinkertons or security agents for the railroads. And the art of the chase wasn't some mystical skill. While some men were good at reading sign, like footprints and broken twigs, the real key to the hunt was old-fashioned detective work. A fugitive needed food, water, and shelter, which forced him toward towns and ranches. The successful manhunter relied on a human network, asking questions in saloons, cultivating informants, and using contacts. The key to finding a man was usually found in a conversation, not in the dirt. Part 6. Case Files from the Frontier. The best way to understand the system is to look at the real stories. Take the Pinkerton Detective Agency. They were the masters of corporate manhunting, hired by railroads to hunt outlaws. They used modern techniques like undercover agents and a vast criminal database called the Rogues Gallery. But their aggressive tactics and allegiance to corporations earned them a sinister reputation, especially after a botched 1875 raid on Jesse James's family farm killed his young half-brother and maimed his mother. The death of Jesse James is the ultimate story of a bounty's power to corrupt. By 1882, a massive $10,000 reward was posted by the Missouri governor and railroad corporations. The lure of this fortune was too much for Robert Ford, a member of James's own gang. He secretly made a deal to kill his leader for the money and a pardon. When James turned his back to dust a picture, Ford shot the unarmed outlaw in the back of the head. The story of Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid shows the blurry line between lawman and hunter. Garrett was the elected sheriff who pursued the kid for a $500 reward offered by the governor. But after killing the kid, Garrett had to lobby the government for months just to get paid, showing that even for a lawman, the transaction was far from guaranteed. And no case shows the moral darkness of the system better than the Dunn brothers of Oklahoma. They were known criminals who also collected bounties. When a $5,000 bounty was posted on outlaw George Newcomb, they used their sister, who was involved with him, to lure him into an ambush, killing him and his partner for the reward money. It's a stark reminder that the men hunting the outlaws were often cut from the same cloth. The Old West bounty hunter was a creature of a specific environment. When that environment changed, he became a relic. His decline wasn't caused by the death of the last outlaw, but by the death of the frontier itself, brought on by technology and bureaucracy. Two technologies were key. First, the railroad. As tracks crisscrossed the West, they eliminated the vast empty spaces where fugitives could hide. Second, and more importantly, the telegraph. For the first time, information could travel faster than a man on a horse. A description of a robber could be wired to the next town in minutes, allowing lawmen to set up an ambush. At the same time, the ad hoc justice system was replaced by organized professional law enforcement. The establishment of city police, state agencies like the Texas Rangers, and a better-funded U.S. Marshals Service diminished the need for private bounty hunters. The Wild West was ultimately tamed not by gunslingers, but by infrastructure and bureaucracy. The bounty hunter of the Old West was not the lone hero of myth. He was a product of a messy, violent time, motivated by cash in a world where justice was often for sale. What part of the real story of bounty hunters surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the real Old West, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Thanks for watching.